Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. As a family of 6, I'm often asked how we master planning for vacations, both from a financial and an experience standpoint. I couldn't think of a better guest to have on than Jill Benedict. Jill is a seasoned travel agent and runs her own unique travel agency that really emphasizes that vacations aren't about the booking of the trips. They're really about creating memorable experiences that align with you personally and financially. Jill shares her insights on navigating cruises, Walt Disney World, optimizing vacations for cost, and making the most of the trip experiences. I have personally worked with Jill and find her to be extremely helpful and reducing my stress level when it comes to planning for vacations. Life is full of transitions, a topic we often talk about on this show, and we dive into Jill's journey from her corporate marketing career to running her own successful travel agency. Jill shares personal stories highlighting the significance of supportive relationships and the true essence of finding harmony between the emotional and financial aspects of life and travel. Please enjoy my conversation with Jill Benedict. Well, Jill, welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Great. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for probably the last 6 or 8 months, ever since my wife, Teresa, found you. And that'll be an interesting conversation or piece to talk about is how she actually found you. But as I mentioned in my intro, you are a travel agent and you specialize in Walt Disney travel. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation because a lot of people wonder how the hell I can even afford to go to Disney, let alone plan it. And so it's going to be, I'm really looking for the conversation because most people, I don't think, realize that there are people like you out there that will take all of this off of their plate. So I can't wait for you to explain to the world like how your business works.
It was pretty amazing. I started my business 10 years ago, and it was I said, I'm only going to sell Disney, nothing else. And we've obviously evolved now. And you book Royal Caribbean with me and other suppliers, but Disney Destinations is our focal point of the agency. And so I was actually struck with the challenge of people were so overwhelmed. I mean, there's over 30 resorts to choose from. And there's all these, how long do I go for? A lot of factors kind of play into it. And so Disney kind of developed this program on the back end, for travel agents, just because, their phone lines were even getting so bombarded with people asking questions and they can't even, field all those. So partners like me, you never pay any extra to book with us. back end, they basically will bake a commission into all bookings. If you book through Disney's website or on the phone, they just absorb that commission. They keep it internally. It's not paid out. If you book with an agent such as myself, I receive it. So then when I'm getting paid that way, I don't charge any fees to my guests. So you're paying the same whether you use me or Disney directly, but in turn, you've got a point of contact, an expert. And beyond that, it's, sometimes you'll just call Disney. They're going to need your exact date. It's not going to be as, customized to you. When you work with me, I'm actually going out, get to know more about your family, what your expectations are, budget, and help you to configure all steps of the trip, starting with, how many days do I go for? Which type of resort is the best fit for me? There's so many different variables that come to just, and the one key word is overwhelmed. That's what I get from guests when they contact me. It's like, I'm so overwhelmed. Where do I start? And when they have that feeling of overwhelmed, that's where I kind of come in and help make the perfect trip that they're happy with.
So I think that's a really interesting point I want to come back to. What you said was how you're paid, because a lot of people will wonder about, well, do I pay Jill or Jill's company directly, or how does that work? I don't think most people realize, and I'm sure that it's different for Disney versus other maybe vendors that you work with. So could you go into a little bit more detail on how the whole compensation works?
Right. So when I started my business, I had to obviously, open up a full service travel agency, get all the prep licensing, insurance. One thing I do mention, I have the errors and omissions insurance. That is huge when you're booking for a travel agent. You want to have somebody with that, if that they're covering all bases. And then once you have all of the correct items in place, then you can go and apply through the suppliers, to become one of their agencies on record. And so when I opened up 10 years ago, that's when, I went and applied. And as I've kind of grown the business, I've applied, with more suppliers to be able to sell them. And so beyond that, then you can also have levels where you're not just selling the product, but you're becoming one of their preferred suppliers. Disney's got what's called their earmarked program, and that's very intense to get invited into. You essentially have to have 2 of their fiscal years on the books. You have to exceed or meet sales and training goals. And then they have to look at your agency and invite you to kind of represent in that earmark program. And that was a huge goal of mine when I first opened and I found out what it was. I was like, I want that. So of course, within the first 2 years that I could, be eligible, I got it right away. And we've kind of grown our ranks within it. And so when you see those earmark logos on travel agent websites, you're especially going to see those are even the higher caliber agencies that are out there, which is nice.
So you had to go through some pretty extensive training or certification program. I don't know if that's the right word for it, like to be able to get this qualification with Disney.
Correct. Yeah. They have like a lot of internal trainings, and then also just they'll have on-site opportunities and training events that you can attend, or, both virtually and in person. Another thing too was me. I was just constantly I used to go like at least once a month when I was living up in Michigan. And then I built my house after right around COVID time. So I've been living here since May of 2021. So gosh, it's been 3 years.
Oh yeah. We're going to get into that life transition because as most people
so
know,
it's just basically having a presence and a relationship with Disney. It's like a lot of people can sell it when you've got all of the right, when you're established travel agency, but then you have to also be careful because there's people that just, aren't as knowledgeable out there, saying it nicely. And so you also don't want to get put into someone that just wants to sell it, but doesn't take the time to actually become a subject matter expert on it too.
Yeah, we're gonna get into your life transitions because I think the audience is gonna really, I think, enjoy your story, because a lot of people think that this podcast is about financial planning, and it's really not. It's about stories and being aware. And so we'll come back to that in a minute, but I want to stick on this for a second. Are there so Disney has their own special certification process that you go through. Are does Universal have their own process?
Yep. So Universal.
Do the other cruise lines have their own process?
Yeah. So like Universal has You Preferred. We achieved that. So we're one of the You Preferred suppliers. Royal Caribbean does have a more of an internal recognition program. We actually did achieve that this past year. That was a huge goal of mine. Was Royal Caribbean is one of my favorite cruise lines. for families. And I know you're going to experience that in February, but they are just doing a phenomenal job, the products that they're rolling out. And that's another thing too. There's an overwhelming amount of cruise lines out there. So I'm actually going on these ships. I've gone, in the last year, like I've gone on Carnival, Virgin Voyages, Disney Cruise Line, Celebrity, like you name it, I'm going, and even river cruises out in Europe. I'm just trying to immerse myself in everything so that when a family's investing money in a trip, that I'm giving them the appropriate recommendations from what our discussions are. And I'm not just saying, oh yeah, go on this cruise ship when it's completely not something you'd be looking for.
So I've always been interested in this is when you go on these trips, do the companies sponsor you or are you paying that like out of pocket yourself?
It's going to depend. Sometimes there will be hosted events. A lot of those will be like the inaugural sailing. For example, when the Icon of the Seas debuted, Royal Caribbean's big ship back in January, it was like a fully hosted cruise where I was able to go on and, create my content and learn everything. But there are going to be what's called like familiarization trips. They call them FAMs for short in the industry. And so FAMs will be given a lot of these opportunities where we'll have to pay, sometimes it's a discounted fee, but we'll still have to cover our own airfare. So a lot of financial investment still goes into it too. And also I do have blessed to have a large, clientele of, higher end clientele. And so I spend quite a bit of my own money on, luxury suites and upgrades and to have the ability to speak on those products to guests too. I'm not just kind of going bare bones or just trying to get travel out of this job. It's also going and, reviewing spas and, concierge level areas beyond just, the normal run of the mill room that you can get somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fascinating things about, I think, what you do. And there's some crossover versus what I do as a financial planner because you work with so many different people at so many different life stages. So as you just mentioned, you could have a very high net worth client that wants the extra, suite or spa, whatever. And then on the other end, you've got somebody that's just needs something bare bones because that's all they can afford because this is their one big trip like every year, every other year, or maybe like once in a lifetime. And it's very similar to the world that I live in because I work with a lot of families. As most people know, TAMA is centered around me working with families, but that definition of family could be very different. So I'm working with parents, but I'm working with sometimes their parents, and I'm working with sometimes their young adult children, if you will. So I run the full spectrum, but I think at the end of the day, and I don't know if this is like this for you, Jill, but it really, because of the diversity of people I work with, it really benefits everyone because I have such a level of experience working with somebody that has high net worth, but also that kid just starting out from college and doesn't know like what to do with his or her with her 401k plan or even what a Roth or a traditional IRA are.
Correct. Yep. And it's being able to relate to everybody too. It's like I've had a job since I was 14. I've always worked so hard my whole life. And even when I was, graduating high school, college, I had my every kind of teenager, spending problems and stuff. So I, never really, I always traveled growing up and things, but I've seen all sides of it and I'm still always willing to stay at every caliber resort just to have to be able to work with everybody. I'm not just catering to high end families. If I have a family that's, okay, here's my budget. How do I get to Disney World? I'm the one that's able to look and see what is costing the most. Like, for example, when you go to Disney World, the biggest bulk of the cost is going to be your resort stay. The theme park tickets will typically remain consistent and kind of the price break where you start seeing, where it comes, less than call it $60 per extra day is like the threshold between when you go from a 4 to a 5-day ticket. So like any extra park days after the 4th becomes significantly reduced, but the highest weights are going to be your initial, base, 1 through 4 days of parks. And then your resort can have a substantial swing. So then I'll have a discussion with the guests where it's like, we want to stay deluxe, but our deluxe hotels are running, $900 a night. So maybe they do a shorter stay with less park days, but they get to stay deluxe. Or I have some families that want to maximize their value and they'll have the kind of mentality, well, I want something still nice, but I'm just sleeping in it. I'm not as, fixated on the resort amenities itself. So then they'll go and stay at, a value or a moderate hotel and be able to stay for a longer duration of the trip too. So those are like the conversations we have, what they're looking for. Like I've had, every sort of request from like, I need to have a hotel with room service. Like that's somebody, what they want on vacation is breakfast delivered every morning. And not all properties will have room service, or I need a hot tub, or we have a little child who needs a zero gravity entrance pool or a splash complex. So those are the kind of the details that I gathered from them to kind of, in conjunction with their budget, kind of figure out what will be the best fit. And then also just as the agent, I'm keeping up on the room refurbishments and what hotels are getting enhancements, or if a pool's closed for refurbishment for 6 months, I know that information. So they're not booking the wrong hotel and getting there and they're disappointed when they arrive.
So I think most of my audience knows this, but so this is like my, public address or service announcement. Teresa, my wife, who most listeners know, is a huge, I usually say Disney freak, but I need to come up with a better word than freak. So if you have one for me, Joe, let me know, because we'll call it fanatic. Part of the pun, I'm all ears. So Teresa was very fortunate as a child and had grandparents that lived outside of Orlando. So she would go down there at minimum once a year. Sometimes she's even told me like, yeah, a kid growing up, I went like 2-3 times a year. I'm like, that's just not normal. Like, do you understand that? Like, you lived a blessed childhood. And my question is, how many, and I know it's all relative, but because of how expensive any vacations got, let alone Disney, how many people are going, making this like a once in a lifetime event?
You know what? I see, a lot of the bigger once in a lifetime I tend to see are going to be like the multi-generational, where the grandparents are treating everybody, because I feel like COVID, that really changed the industry and how people save for their futures and how they spend. Because I found that, after that kind of, not going to call a wake up call, but, it changed the dynamic where now these grandparents, instead of stashing the money away for when they pass away, they want to spend the money while they're living and create those experiences with their families. And so I have a lot of grandparents coming and they're just doing this multi-generational trip with all the kids and the grandkids. And, I make those kind of trips happen for them. So those are going to be kind of categorized as the once in a lifetime. And then I'll have a mix of people who, it's funny, a lot I'll get is, we want to do it up. My husband's a business traveler and he wants the nicest hotels and he's going to hate Disney, but we're doing it for the kids. And they end up going and this family just falls in love with Disney. So then they become like repeat guests where they're going, once, twice a year. They're always going and that's what they like to spend their money on. It's like their happy place. And so it's just a mix of, even then I have people that just go on, they just do their yearly kind of spring break trip. And then what's actually helped me evolve was when, a lot of my repeat guests were like, okay, well, we don't want to go to Disney again for the 4th year in a row, but what else can you help me with? And at the time, I was only kind of selling trips that I was familiar with, like theme parks, Disney, Universal, some Disney Cruise Line. And then the need for other destinations kind of came into play. So then if I'm ever not comfortable selling something, I'll always refer it out to a colleague that is more experienced in the area, because I don't want to compromise my reputation. But then it's like kind of finding, like the beaches all-inclusive resorts, for example, that's a brand underneath Sandals, which is adult only. You'll see them for honeymoons and stuff. So they've got like a great family program for all-inclusive. So we've become kind of experts with the beaches portfolio, and then obviously the other cruise lines. And then we have a whole all-inclusive division now that my brother actually leads up. So he's doing all the training and the on-site resort visits to help us, assist families beyond just their theme parks and cruises too.
If I can't imagine like the one day, so as everybody knows probably by now who listens to this show knows, I have a set of triplets plus one. And I can't imagine what the cost is, or what the cost would be for I'll call a legacy trip like that, where I'm taking my 4 kids plus their kids and Teresa, and I'm going to put that aside because that'll blow my mind up financially. It's hard enough trying to plan a affordable family vacation for the 6 of us. So maybe that's where we go next. And you mentioned this in our, before we hit record, that you work with quite a few families that have 3 or more kids, because what gets really challenging for us as parents of 3 or more kids is that you have a capacity limit within a room. So sometimes like we're forced to not buy one room, but to buy two rooms. And I think that's, let's just say at 5 or more, is really impactful. So walk us through like how do you help somebody like me deal with that?
Yes. And so that is another, just comes with proficiency in this, is learning all of the different destinations and the room configurations, because there's so many different rules and caveats. Like, for example, a lot of resorts at Disney World are going to cap out at 4 guests, but then there is this like rule where if it's a child that's age 2 or under, you can add them as the extra guest. They'll have complimentary cribs. Some will max out, at 5 plus, the extra child. And then you've got that layer of, well, this auxiliary sleeper is a day bed and it only caps out at, an adult size, versus there's a twin pull down bed that is 100-pound weight limit. So you've got all of those kind of, when you're working with somebody, you have to know the different properties and what can accommodate them. And then there's also the factor where it's suites versus 2 rooms with a guaranteed connecting door. So then you've got the hotels where some don't have connecting doors, some do. Which room categories have that? It's all like, obviously my head's like a crazy library of all this, so I know it. And then when you go to cruise ships and all-inclusive, it's the same thing. You're going to find options for, larger suites, which can be more costly, but sometimes it's more economical to do 2 rooms, but then, making sure you have connecting doors. And then the other layer, like for Disney Cruise Line, for example, they have a lot of 5th sleeper rooms, which will work out well. But a lot of the regular cruise lines will max out at 4 guests, and even they will count 6-month-old as a guest. So if you have an infant, it's going to count against your cruise count. A lot of guests are like, well, I have this infant in a crib, but then people don't always understand that cruise rooms in relation to like hotel or resort rooms are going to be smaller at times. So even just putting like a pack and play in there is going to really impact the space, and, fire codes come into play. But then there's configuring, like for a family of 6, it's like, do you do a 3-and-3 or a 4-and-2 configuration? Because the prices can change there too. So that's when you've got an expert like me who can run those scenarios with the connecting doors and take that time out of you trying to research this. And then I come back and present options for you that work the best, both from a deal perspective and just, location, budget, all that's in play.
So full disclosure, audience, if you hadn't picked up by now, my family, let's just call it, Teresa, has worked with Jill. That's how I found out about Jill. But going back to why I wanted to have you on is because I get this question about vacations and spending all the time from families I work with. And one of the things I think that surprises most people when they start working with me is that I am not the moral or jury police on what people spend. Like, right. You can spend whatever you want to spend on whatever you want to spend it on, as long as, here's the caveat, it aligns to your purpose and objectives. Like what lifestyle goals that you have, what financial goals you have, what family goals you have. They could all be different. And what I try to do is make sure that spending your financial life aligns with your personal life, and that there's some harmony between those two, because a lot of people think that, your financial life is one silo and your personal life is another silo. Well, I don't believe that at all. I think that the two are extremely interconnected. Financial decisions affect you emotionally. Emotional decisions affect your financial decisions. So one of the questions that I wanted to come back to was this destination, if you will. So being married to Teresa, I already automatically know that I'm going to be involved in more Disney trips than I ever thought I would take in my entire life. I probably exceeded that by now. But my question is, how do you help somebody, a family, an individual even, find their happy place, like their like ideal destination? And then I'll let you answer that first before I ask my follow-up question.
Sure. So I just want to tackle like the Disney financial part of it. Throughout the years when I started, I found that creating a more comprehensive quote for guests when they're first getting started in the planning, so they can see not only what their room and ticket package is going to cost, but potential enhancements. I've got that all listed out when I quote a guest. So I'll say, okay, for example, to buy the line skipping passage called Lightning Lane right now, you can't add it to the package in advance currently, but it will cost XYZ, 7 days prior to your trip if you're interested. If you want to add a dining plan, here are the inclusions. The dining plan is a big thing that's up for debate with Disney constantly. I always get asked to plan it. Is the dining plan worth it? Everybody that's like, they'll just ask me if it's worth it. And it's a loaded question because it's honestly going to depend on the family. Like, for example, you get an alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage with every meal. But if you're somebody that drinks water, doesn't drink alcohol, that's an added value of the dining plan. It also, like if you're a vegetarian, sometimes the vegetarian entrees are, lower cost than a steak. So it'll come down to, eating habits. And also the character meals are weighted as the highest cost because they're kind of a fixed price. And so if you're doing a good amount of fixed price character meals, then it absolutely comes into play to help the family. But it's nice because I lay everything out there so then they can kind of take a look at the potential add-ons and what they foresee it versus just, getting it added on. And also the dining plan, from a financial planning standpoint, when they add it to the trip, we then know how many credits they're getting and then we budget it through the planning. So it becomes more of an all-inclusive for them. So they're not going to Disney World and coming home with a gigantic food bill, which that also happens to a lot of families where they get down there and food costs can just be, we're on vacation, trying to the Magic Band. And then you get back not realizing, oh my gosh, I just blew a ton of extra on food. So for the financial planning reasons, a lot of people like knowing pretty much what their food costs are going to be upfront, paying for it, that expense is gone. And then they can kind of be more stress-free during the trip. But then I know you asked me about finding the dream destination. So essentially,
before you answer that, Jill, let me come back because there's one thing I really failed to mention when I was talking about how we utilized you and your agency. In full disclosure, I don't know. I think it was $1,000 or $2,000 that you saved us on our next trip because of that whole issue of us being a family of 6, where rather than booking like 3 and 3 in a room, you booked 4 and 2. And it literally dropped the cost by $1,000.
Right.
And which I thought was amazing. And because that allows us to do other things while we're there. So I wanted to point that out. And I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, why I wanted you to explain your cost structure, because at the end of the day, it's not costing anybody more to work with you, but it could cost you a whole lot less on your trip when you do work with you.
Correct. And we have even back-end rates, like for Royal Caribbean, which is one of our partners, for example, we'll have like where we can pretty much add onboard credit to everybody's bookings. We've got access to lower rates that are just for travel agent inventory, like 2-person rooms that can add up to help bring down the cost. There's all kinds of back-end perks. We'll have promotions where we can add, specialty dining meals and things that we're always eligible for. So we can always get better deals. There are agencies out there that will charge fees. I know it's a big controversy in my industry where it's, everyone should be charging a fee. But then some agencies like myself, I'm just like, I'm compensated by the suppliers. I don't want to charge that fee. I'm content with where I'm at with this. So I choose not to. It's just, it's a preference thing. But yeah, so it doesn't cost anybody extra. And in fact, even we have a best price guarantee pretty much on all suppliers. So it's like when you book and something, you'll see 20% off Disney rooms or, a kids sale free. We can always run our guest rates and price adjust even after your deposit's down. So if anything drops, before your final payment time, if you see it online, like my guests will see something and they'll just ask, hey, does this apply to us? It takes me 2 seconds to just run their rate and say, no, you have the better rate. And from a planning perspective, you're going to see sales all the time for cruises, for everything out there. There's always a sale. So the best time to actually book is when the cruise line stuff. If you can book really far in advance, I know some people aren't as flexible. They have to wait on school schedules and sports and stuff. But if you are able to book like right now for like spring break of 2026, call it, you're going to get the lowest kind of pricing. And then as the ships fill up and stuff, they'll gradually increase rates and then, run sales. But then ultimately those people that booked far in advance get the lowest pricing. That is like 99%. That usually is what ends up happening.
So that's interesting. That's going to be our next point of conversation when I have you back on, because I could spend the next half hour just going through that.
Right.
So,
And even like Disney, they quietly increase their room and ticket rates like anywhere from 1 to 3 times per year.
yeah.
And they just they'll drop it in. Sometimes they'll drop it in when a promo is getting announced. But as soon as so for Disney, for example, you can book with a $200 refundable deposit and it's fully refundable up to 30 days prior to check-in. So that, that's locking you in to that current price that you booked at. And it will increase. Sometimes like I'll say you actually booked so early that your price is better than this 30% room promo that got released months later. And people, it's
Wow.
wild.
Yeah, that is, I would never thought of that. So let's come back to that destination question.
Yes.
And then I wanted to get into your personal story because I know I only have you for a finite period of time. So the destination question was going back to Teresa, and like Disney is her special place. And so growing up, obviously that had a big influence on why that's the way it is today. But do you go above and beyond, like trying to help, families or clients find that unique space that's really great for them? Or is it just people are all over, like, I want to do something different every year?
Yeah, it's some people, they want to experience this. A lot of it, with the families wanting to experience Disney's kind of like a lifetime bucket list for everyone, whether you go when you're younger. Some people will come to me, we never went when we were young, we want to go when we're old. Then also, I get a lot of people who are just like, hey, I want to go somewhere warm, or I want to go to Europe. And through my social media, like on my business page, I post a lot of my own personal trips and what I'm doing. I'm always traveling somewhere. And it also, I feel like that will inspire people to kind of give them ideas of, where else that you can experience by seeing it through somebody that they know. It's not just, me throwing a dart at a map when somebody contacts me, but speaking on personal experiences. Like I just went to the Galapagos Islands over the summer, and that was absolutely amazing. I didn't know what to expect on that. I had an opportunity come from Celebrity who wanted me to go on there. They built this yacht type ship that seats, or it has 100 max capacity, for example. And it's just built for the Galapagos only. It's unreal. It's like when you normally think of going down there, it's like a lot of these older ships. It's not a luxury experience. It's more kind of roughing it, so to say. This was like nothing I've ever even imagined. And so they had me go out there, and just this whole trip made me fall in love with it. Like, that's somewhere I want to go back to now. But that has, both people I met on the trip, a lot of people were there because that was like their bucket list item to do. And then I had people who have wanted to go there, but they never really knew anyone that had done it. So now they have me as a resource to kind of guide them through the options. And both if they want to do the yacht experience. Then we had somebody book that saw my experiences. They didn't want to go for the yacht, but we found them a different supplier because of ships and options that were out there. And we found them something that, fit their budget range for that trip. So it's also, when I go out to places, I'm not only, looking at what I'm doing personally, but I'm putting other itineraries and options in parallel to my experiences too, so that when, I customize it to each guest. Or I'd say, like, for like the pre-arrival, we went to Quito, Ecuador. And that's a place where, it's a third world country, and I wouldn't feel safe traveling there by myself with my husband Ubering around. I mean, some people have different, I'm kind of big on safety and, feeling safe. So that one, because Celebrity escorted us, they even had security guards with our small groups during the day. I felt totally safe and content. But if I have a guest that's going there, now I'm saying, well, you want to go with an organized tour guide to ultimately feel safe, even like driving there and stuff. And it's having that firsthand experience that just helps people find those destinations and make their dreams come true and do it right. So they're not investing the money and then disappointed at the end with the outcome.
I'm jotting notes down as fast as I can because you keep giving me more questions for our next conversation. So yes. Where I want to go next is, because I know we only have a little bit more time left, is I want to go back to your story. How did you end up in the travel agency? How did you end up from Michigan and now living in Florida? Tell us your story, because I think the listeners will really gravitate to your story.
So I was one of the fortunate ones that grew up pretty much going to Disney World every year. My family also, we went.
Oh, so you're one of those. You're a Teresa.
My grandparents, my dad came from a family of 7 kids, and my grandparents actually took my dad and his siblings to Disney World like the year it opened. They stayed at the they drove the station wagon down from Michigan. So like it was in my blood. I was growing up a Disney person, whether I liked it or not. And I loved it. And so started going there as a kid. We went like big family trip on the Disney Cruise Line the first year that the cruise came out back in, it was like 1999, I want to say. So we did it all. So I always had that love for Disney in my back pocket. And then as I got older, it was like that love for travel and like the thought of seeing new places and eating local foods always stuck with me. When I was 19, I went and visited my friend in Paris when she was studying abroad. And I can't believe I did this. I just bought like a airplane ticket to go see her. There wasn't like international cell phones at the time, so it's like, meet me at this point in the airport. I flew there alone, met her at the airport. Somehow found her. It worked out, but I didn't really understand the euro to dollar conversion. So I actually had to email my mom on the trip and say, can you put more money in my debit account? Because I'm poor. And I need to get home. So the one thing too, I went broke on the trip, so I couldn't afford to go to Disneyland Paris. So that is now on my bucket list. When I get back to Paris again, I will go to Disneyland Paris and check that. I'm hoping next summer it's happening. So so the thought of like careers and having anything that had to do with business travel was always kind of a goal of mine. I went through several corporate, marketing and event type jobs where I did get to travel sometimes for work, but then I met my husband on Match.com and he ends up being like this avid travel guy. He's an attorney. He's got a little bit, flexibility with his work. He can work remotely. He's not a court attorney, so he does patents. And so him and we start traveling when we're dating. He's already been to like, call it, they lived in Luxembourg when he was a kid. So he's Mr. World Traveler himself. And we're traveling even more. I'm blowing out my vacation time at my corporate job. And I'm just, at that point too, I got hooked on Disney. We went for the first time. He's like, this place is great. And he only went like once as a kid. We ended up getting annual passes. We're going there all the time. And then finally it gets to the point where I'm out of vacation time at work. I get engaged. I have this idea of like, he's like, what would make you happy? I really wanted to work at Disney corporate. One of my good friends from high school and college actually did that. And that was always like, I was so jealous. I was like, I just want to work corporate, but you have to live in like Orlando, California. At the time, we couldn't leave Michigan, my husband's job. So I was like, well, I can't go move down there. I planned Disney a lot for people. And my first thing was going to be to start a blog. And I could have been before my time before all like the food blogs and things, but
it's crazy.
Like, to make money, you have to get advertisements. And what if people don't like my blog and I don't get any ads and I make no money? So that was out the door. And then I was like, well, maybe I can like plan Disney trips for a fee. And that's when I started researching, travel agents and stuff. And then I figured out how to open up my own. I opened it up, ended up leaving my full-time job because I was tapped out of the vacation time and we were about to get married, and long story there. But so now I'm doing this full-time.
No, it's a good one.
My goal was just to supplement my full-time marketing career, like my salary, so that I could just say, okay, yeah, I did something and made my money and I'm good. And what ended up happening for years to come was just like totally exceeded my expectations and my goals. And it's always been, very strategic growth. It was never about me. Like, I know a lot of agencies are set up in this world where you have to have, hundreds of agents and that, to make money. I never wanted to depend on others for me to make my living. And so I've always worked alongside my team, as a top producer and mentoring everybody that comes on board and really, having the passion. It's never been like, you'll never find like an open hiring on my website or anything. Each team member that's come after I said I'd be a one-woman show has come to me with like a reason, whether they were an amazing client and then they asked me about joining and I saw their passion through, working together on their trips, or, somebody introduced me to. But it's all kind of, like I said, we're going on 10 years next year, which is just wild to me. And then, and my husband now, after COVID, he was able to kind of work remotely more. And so we ended up building our house, and it has really cut our costs down on airfare to Disney World and to the cruise ship. So I say from a financial investment, it was a good one.
So one of the reasons why I wanted you to tell your story in such detail, and I appreciate you going into something very personal like this, is because I work with a lot of families that may not currently be enjoying their corporate career or job. And I just had Carrie Chauchet on the show a few weeks ago talking about there's a difference between career and a job. Career is I'm in marketing, I'm in accounting. I don't like being in accounting. I want to be in marketing. That's that's a career switch. Versus a job is I work as a social media director or an accountant in that field, but I don't necessarily like the company that I'm working for. So I want to change jobs, not necessarily career. So I always just like to point that out. But regardless, I work with lots of families that maybe do not enjoy their career and do not enjoy their current role. And so I think your story hopefully gives people the inspiration they need to be able to take that first step and do something. And that's not altogether different from when a family knocks on my door for the first time. There's a lot of trepidation. They think they're going to be judged. There's a lot of anxiety.
I got judged. Somebody that my husband knows laughed in his face about me. They're like, she's got her, PR and marketing and communications degree and a good job. And you're just going to let her quit and be a travel agent. It was to this day, that person, I laugh. I'm like, I wonder if he knows I'm doing okay, because he
right.
And full disclosure though, it is not a get rich quick job. It probably took me a good 2.5 years to actually kind of financially get where I was at that initial job that I left. And so you either have to, when you're doing something that drastic that requires you to build clientele, you either have to have a nest egg or, some sort of support to kind of get it to where it needs to be. And even every agent that will join my team, it's a lot of them are discouraged at the beginning. You'll get ghosted by people. And I still get ghosted to this day by, on a daily basis by, guests you're doing quotes for and stuff. But it's just knowing that it's not a get rich quick thing, and that nothing's too good to be true. And it can be super lucrative. And I also have found that in this instance, a lot of it is networking and referrals. And I feel like the bulk of my trips have been people that are referred to me by others, because there's just so many options for travel agents in this world that most people are going to somebody that they either know has personally worked with them, or, maybe they follow me on social media, but it's a personalized referral, not just me kind of cold calling or running random ads and stuff too.
Well, I'm really glad, Jill, that you pointed that out, because there is a very strong tie to the portfolio management side of my business of what I do. To build long-term wealth, there's no get rich scheme. There's no picking Amazon 20 years ago when it first started was once in a lifetime. And you would have had to held that stock through an 80% drawdown. So maybe it started at 100 and it went all the way down to 20. Most people are not going to hold through that. But I think I like how you point that out, because the way that I see it too, this is why it's called the emotional balance sheet. There's an emotional component along with a financial component, as I talked about earlier, to not only financial planning, but life planning as well. And so, yeah, you may not make as much money initially doing something, making a transition the way that you did. But I'm sure, and this is where I need to talk to your husband next, I'm sure there was a very high emotional return, because you were probably much, much happier making that switch, even making less money. So that's, I think, the other point that I want to, make sure
funny because we actually at first, when I first started it out, I go on my email, and we still live in Lake Orion, Michigan, and we belong to Oakhurst Country Club. And so the summer that I quit that job, this is also a joke with us, I didn't have much going on. I'm like, hello, customers. I'd love to book. I wanted to work. I wanted to book trips. Just nobody wanted to book trips, really. I thought the minute my doors open, it'd be flooded with everyone going to Disney. And it wasn't that way. And so I would go to the pool in the summer, and I really liked the mozzarella sticks because we had to make a monthly spend there. So I'm eating mozzarella sticks by the pool. He's at his office working. That was not emotional balance. That was very bad, because he would get so mad. He's like, enough of the mozzarella sticks, the pool. This is getting, he was almost ticked off. And I was like, it'll be worth it one day. I promise I'll make the money. I'll do it. And I never did, but it took a while to get established. So we had a lot of hurdles to kind of go over and obstacles to overcome. And then it actually got to the point where I got so busy. So now my brother and sister work with me. I also had to evaluate before I had them step away from their full-time careers. My sister was a dental assistant. My brother worked at Quest Diagnostics. but he's in as our chief financial officer. Cause I was like I did all the finances with like a little help with my husband. I did like all the admin stuff on the back end, the website, you name it. Like I was doing all of it. And then I got so emotionally burnt out. It affected our marriage. It's like I'd be working till like, 9 a.m. till 1, 2 in the morning some nights where I didn't leave my office. I would just, and it like had like, he was like neglected watching TV on the couch. And then it was like that, well, you wanted me to make more money. This is what you wanted, but now you're mad because I'm so successful. I can't have time for our relationship. So then it became, all those decisions of can we afford to get more help for me and then have them take that leap in their life to come join it. And so now my brother's been here since February 2022, I want to say. So yeah, 2 years. And then my sister was, or something. They came right around 2 years each, 3 years. So it's been great, but that was very hard in all of this.
Yeah, again, you've given us so many topics of so many talking points for our next conversation with all this, because that's why, again, I wanted to have you on to explain really how this whole travel industry works and the cost and all that. But I think a lot of people will get a lot out of your story, and again, get to the point where it's like, maybe I can do this as well. And I know it wasn't easy, as you just explained, but I think that having a supportive partner or husband, spouse, wife, that is a really critical component of all this, because there's no Tama without Teresa. There's probably a reason why she's the T in Tama. She comes first. And that's how it all works today. That's how we're able to make it work. So
we're in a good spot now. It's now in my latest thing is like, you ready for something crazy? Or you want to do something crazy? Because usually it involves us like traveling somewhere big within like a month's notice or something. Like I just announced on Facebook, I'm like, oh, I'm home for the whole month of September. I've got nothing. I'm here. And then I had a cruise opportunity come with one of our celebrity sales managers yesterday. She's like, please, it mean a lot if you go on this, because she's hosting. And so long story short, we're going on a cruise next week that we weren't before. And so it's just a lot of, me asking over like the Galapagos thing. I actually had to show him like a 5-minute video on the couch of like, this is what this boat actually is going to the Galapagos this summer. Let's do it. And so it's me coming to him now, and he's totally on board. And, we finally kind of figured things out with it, and it's good, and he embraces it. But he was always a supporter from day one. Like that guy is a saint for everything. He's, opportunities and everything he's given me, being supportive of it. He's the best.
Well, I think you've already, again, set us up for so many conversations in the future, but I think one of them is going to have to involve having your husband on as well. So,
yes.
Well, Jill,
he was actually, his story, he was a engineering undergrad at U of M, and he went to do his summer internship, and he hated engineering. And then he's like, oh no, now I have this engineering degree, because his dad was in engineering. He's like, I have this degree and I don't like it. What do I do? So that's what he researched and found patent law. And he went to MSU and got a law degree and became a patent attorney by being miserable in something else. So he's got a really cool story too.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I know we're probably up on time, so I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I can't wait. I can't already wait to our next conversation.
Anytime.
Thank you so much for being on. We'll put links to your sites in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to reach out to contact you?
You can always go through my website, wisheswonderstravel.com. There's, contact information is all on there. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes on TikTok, but I'm still learning that.
Got it. Well, Jill, absolute pleasure to finally meet you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Sounds great.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, could you do me a favor? Do you know anyone else who would enjoy these types of conversations where we talk about the intersections of our emotional and financial lives? Because if you do, it's actually going to help both of us. Could you share this conversation with someone? They will think you're great because you just gave them this terrific podcast, and it helps me grow my audience. Or you can tell them to go to tamacapital.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.